Sexual reclamation is spiritual rebirth, is a presentation based on a radical idea. Take a moment to think about what these words actually imply. To even consider these words, one must step into rebellion and become a visionary. For the world we live in preaches the exact opposite of this. Women have been indoctrinated with the belief that our sexuality taints or even has power to destroy our spirituality. I am here to make a bold declaration. I believe that reclaiming our sexuality has the power to expand our spirituality by being a catalyst for our healing, opening the portals for divine connection, and being the process by which our truest self is born. I have an ask. As we journey together during this short time, I'd like you to pay attention to your body and thoughts. Throughout this presentation, I invite you to pay attention to what you feel and from where those feelings originate. I have intentionally embedded hypnotic elements, including metaphors, into this presentation to help you move into a space deeper than you normally inhabit. You may notice thoughts and feelings come up. Pay attention to them and to what they are teaching you. In this space, you are more connected into yourself and to the inner workings of your mind and body. The most valuable question I can ask you is, who are you? And instead of you giving me the typical answers to these questions, I'd like you to simply form an image of who you are in your mind. In this presentation, I share a number of metaphors that just might alter the image you are now creating, because you are here to learn, to shift, and to grow, aren't you? Often, the most powerful catalyst for shifting and growing is to perceive ourselves differently. I'd like you to create an image of a seed hanging high in the branches of a tall tree, feeling happy and content in its present state. Everything is great for our seed until it isn't anymore. Something new and seemingly terrible is beginning to happen. Our seed falls to the earth. Oh no, it might say, I've fallen and lost the high place that I once held. What will become of me? How do I get back up there? Then, of course, you and I know what happens next, because this is happening all over the planet, and it happens every day. Seeds fall, and then things get worse. Our seed has fallen in a very dirty place. Soon the rain comes and turns the dirt to mud, deep mud. Our poor seed is beside himself. What is happening to him and why? Darkness envelops him. All that he has now is a memory of where he was and a vague sense of a very hard to reach idea that he perhaps was made for something more than he is presently able to understand. Now terror sets in and the traces of comfort completely disappear as he begins to realize that he is being penetrated by the water that now surrounds him. The penetrating water seems to be the harbinger of the end. He swells to the point of breaking. No, he laments. Everything I know about who I am is shattering. Our human perspective says these are the cycles of life. This is not psychology or spirituality. This is biology. This is a mundane, everyday life event that is happening all around us all the time. To us, this is the purpose for which the seed was created. In fact, following the seed in the process of breaking to the seed itself becoming a massive oak tree seems so natural, we hardly think about it, let alone mourn with the seed. The shattering of the seed, darling, is simply how the tree is born. It is teaching us that a tree has two very different ways of existing. First as a seed and second as a tree. The process of unbecoming one and becoming the other is natural and simple, something we take for granted. A seed becomes a tree, but even as a seed, it was always a tree, wasn't it? Do you see the deeply embedded and beautiful metaphor for your life playing out in the perpetuation of the plant kingdom all around you? Metaphorically, you are the seed and the tree. This metaphor teaches us that there are two very different ways in which we can live our lives and function as human beings. Trees are a parallel for our ultimate potential. They are the true essence of who we are. They show us how to break free from our limitations, to fully mature, to bear fruit and expand endlessly. Seeds, they show us where we begin. Everything a seed needs to become a tree, except, of course, for water, earth, and sun, is already inside of it. There is something of value for us to learn here. The truth for us is that we have inherent, unlimited potential for expansion, just like trees. Or we can, if we choose, live as seeds. This process of breaking out of the old and becoming the new is simply being born again or experiencing a rebirth. It's the process of being born anew and becoming a new creature. It's breaking out of the seed and becoming the tree we were always meant to be. As we look deeper into the experience of living a seed kind of life compared to a tree kind of life, there are so many lessons we can gather. A seed has hard walls to protect the developing tree, but those walls hold it back from reaching its potential. There comes a moment when the seed must choose to surrender to the process of breaking and becoming. The hard outer shell will keep the tree from breaking out into a space of growth. As a seed, it is impossible to gain access to all the resources it needs to fulfill its potential. A seed has limits. A seed is small and doesn't grow or change. A seed doesn't bear fruit. A seed is closed off from the outside world. A seed is unaware of its own potential. A seed doesn't really live fully in reality, but has two distinct and separate awarenesses, that of its shell and that of being an indistinct something bigger and more magnificent. The seed escapes its life of limitation by allowing the circumstances of life to soften it, or allowing water to penetrate its hard outer shell. While its circumstances create the possibility for breaking free, it must break through not from the outside in, but from the inside out. The small seedling penetrates from the inside, breaking out to access its full capacity to bear fruit and to expand. Let's look deeper into the idea of penetration. The process that begins with ejaculation and ends in pregnancy is also a metaphor for our rebirth and spiritual growth. A large number of sperm begin the journey, but the only one that finishes the journey is the one that succeeds in penetrating the outer layers of the egg. Through the process of penetration, The sperm accesses its ability to reach its potential, to self-actualize, or to grow and expand into its actual self, a baby. In this metaphor, we are both the egg and the sperm, because both feminine and masculine aspects exist within us. Like the egg, we must allow life to penetrate us, to receive newness of life by moving into a level of accelerated growth and expansion. Those that choose to live rigid and without trust will resist life's attempts to penetrate them and experience it as trauma. We must also, like the sperm, take the journey with the intent of self-actualizing by penetrating life. Those that doubt, fear, minimize themselves, or remain unintentional won't allow for penetration and will never self-actualize. They may be ejaculated into life and may even passively take the journey, but they will never penetrate that access door to self-actualization and newness of life. Simply, they live and die having never fully opened the door to their greatest potential. You see, penetration is key. We must allow our minds, bodies, and souls to be penetrated with life and with truth. When we allow, in only the healthiest of circumstances, ourselves to be penetrated during sex, portals to our highest potential are opened. To be penetrated by pleasure is to openly receive. In that space of openness and surrender, it is easy to let go of what holds us back and weighs us down. The only moment in which we can be penetrated is the moment we are presently in. So presence is also key. We can live tense due to living in lack, doubt, mistrust, and in fear. None of these conditions allows for penetration. Total surrender is necessary for physical, emotional, and spiritual penetration. True penetration happens only when we are fully open in surrender. Penetration is a spiritual principle. Before penetration, we must be turned on to life and open. We must have a sense of trust. Without openness and trust as a foundation, penetration can create fear, hurt, and barriers. We must have a sense of safety with who is penetrating us. If it is our partner, trust in our partner must exist for us to be open in surrender. If we don't have that kind of trust, we get to use our voices and our wisdom to help create it. If it is life in general penetrating us, we get to decide if everything is working for us and is therefore worthy of our trust. If not, anything we resist or cling to, meaning all efforts to change others or to change life itself, is futile. God and his universe have already proven themselves to be perfectly trustworthy. We must, like the sperm, take the journey with the intent of self-actualizing by penetrating life. And like the egg, we must allow life to penetrate us. Sperm teach us the masculine. The egg teaches us the feminine. And I think that is really quite beautiful. The masculine and feminine also teach us of our own sacred divine power. If we truly are beings with unlimited potential, then it is our work to rediscover that potential or untapped power. This includes wisely removing all parts of who we think we are that limit our potential and our power, our limits, the parts of us that don't believe in ourselves, our fears, simply the versions of ourselves that aren't the truest versions of ourselves. There is a metaphor in the Bible about putting new wine into old bottles that applies beautifully here. How often do you attempt to add new and good things into your life, to reach new heights, to attain higher ways of being, to accomplish a new goal, and you somehow find a way to, what the world says, sabotage it? It's not really sabotage, and I encourage you to see it differently, because you are not your own worst enemy. The truth is simply this: the unconscious mind insists upon integrity. Said another way, it insists that new ideas and new accomplishments cannot be received into old belief systems. If they are out of integrity, the unconscious mind will simply reject the new ideas and the new actions. I would invite you to believe that you are not your own worst enemy. Self-sabotage, as the world labels it, is a myth. What we call self-sabotage is simply what results when we try to put new wine into old bottles, and our unconscious rejection, because the new content doesn't fit in the old context or belief structure. New ideas don't fit into our old perceptions of the world. We must not only adopt higher ways of living, we must also become clear and open vessels to receive those new ways. New wine in new bottles are able to be preserved together, and this is the key to growth and expansion. A container is a place to hold a thing and to set a thing apart. Your relationship is a container whether you are alone or with a partner. The masculine is doing the holding and setting apart. The feminine allows itself to be held and to be set apart. When each half contributes to the creation of this container, magic is created. There truly is something about marriage and relationships that turns water into wine. In the container of a healthy relationship, through sex especially, the woman is not only set apart, she is cleansed, purified, and made holy. Or said another way, she is healed from her past hurts, from the limits she has due to programming, and is brought to see herself as she always was, divine. This is an idea that you may have never considered before, that I would like you to at least consider now. Think about this. Through sex, a woman learns to let go of rigidity, to be open and vulnerable, to be honest, to use her voice vulnerably and freely, to learn to move intuitively, not from head space, but from body space and heart space, to trust, to follow pleasure, and to receive. Sex also serves as a vehicle for a flow of powerful, creative energy, to open energetic channels to receive more, for gaining access to her most authentic self, because sexual energy carries each woman's unique spiritual blueprint. Breaking through old emotions, fears, and limitations, because orgasm is communion with God and with the holiest version of ourselves. This level of sexual connection and healing is possible when each partner brings all of the deepest parts of themselves to the table, physically and emotionally. Emotionally open, guard down, truth speaking. This lets the most authentic version of self rise to the surface. This kind of sex changes us and allows the most truthful parts of us to come out. This kind of healing is a process. As the partnership goes deeper and deeper and becomes more and more vulnerable, her channels to her own spiritual nature and her spiritual connection are opened and expanded. While this allows her access to higher and higher levels of enlightenment, it also opens up areas that hold fears, wounds, limits, and shame. As she becomes more and more vulnerable and open, it becomes natural for her to let go physically and to let go verbally through emotional expression. This openness and vulnerability dissolves her barriers. She must be in a space where she can be fully open to her own vulnerability in order to access and release all that she must shed in order to become that version of herself that is most true and authentic, her most spiritual self. Sex is how we break through the barriers, the limits, and our own rigidity. Or said another way, conscious, healthy sex is how we heal trauma. When a plant or seed is crushed, the essential oil of the plant is released. When our outer shell is penetrated, the most potent and essential parts of you are also released. Your unique elements and characteristics are liberated and spill out into every facet of your life. You no longer copycat the world and are no longer content to be merely a follower. You become the confident leader of your own life. You know who you are, concentrated power, and unique beauty. You see, nearly everything we have been taught about sex is wrong. Most women don't even know that their bodies are capable of producing different kinds of orgasms from multiple erogenous zones in her body. Most women don't know that they have at least 3 orgasmic superpowers. And if they do, they certainly don't know that these orgasmic superpowers are also spiritual powers. Symbolically, your body is a temple. The exact placement and characteristics of the orgasmic zones in every woman's body mirror a diagram of an ancient Israelite temple. Within the protected confines of the inner court, but still on the outside of the temple, is the altar. It is upon this altar that acts are performed before access is given to the inner parts of the temple. Located in the external portion of every woman's yoni or pussy is the clitoris. The clitoris is a super-sensitized organ whose sole purpose is to produce pleasure. It is powerful for getting the flow of hormones and neurotransmitters going in the process of physical arousal. The clitoris is amazing at beginning the process of turning on, warming up, and lubricating, both necessary for penetration and deeper orgasmic experiences. Clitoral pleasure is superpower number 1. Located outside of the body, the clitoris responds mechanically to stimulation, meaning a woman can experience clitoral pleasure before she feels open and surrendered. Or said another way, it is through clitoral stimulation that all the processes needed to bring her to open surrender happen. Only when acts are performed satisfactorily and the gifts of time and intention are offered upon the altar by those deemed worthy is entrance given to the temple. It is only then that the temple doors are opened to what lies behind the curtain, the holy place. The G-spot, a second highly erogenous zone, is located just inside the vaginal opening and behind the pubic bone. It is from the G-spot or G-zone that a woman's superpower number 2 comes forth. With a gush of lubrication that may or may not accompany a G-spot orgasm, every woman is capable of female ejaculation. Every woman has a sacred right to honor herself and this sacred process. She has a right to protect timing as diligently as a priest would protect the sanctity of the temple. Every woman also has a right to enjoy G-spot orgasms, which, unlike clitoral orgasms, require emotional connection and openness, simply because it is here where her sacred wild resides, the part of her that most wants to be seen, heard, and experienced, but the part she protects the most. At the back of the temple is the Holy of Holies, where we gain direct access to God and to our own expansion into divinity. We all know that the vagina ends at the cervix. Essentially, the cervix is the portal by which women bring life into this world, as it dilates during labor and deliver and allows a baby to make its entrance. Anatomically, this is less important to understand than it is symbolically. Women are heart-centered, yet the true epicenter of her femininity is at her cervix. The cervix serves functionally and symbolically as a portal. We both give birth and are symbolically reborn at our own cervix. The cervix is at the innermost core and is connected to both the heart and the crown chakra. So cervical orgasmic experiences are full body and spiritually transcendent experiences. Few women know that the cervix can and does produce some of the most intense and most fulfilling orgasms. Cervical orgasms produce profound energetic spiritual reset and neurological shifting. This is orgasmic superpower number 3. Both vaginal orgasms are dependent upon deep emotional connection and surrender. Many women have only ever experienced clitoral orgasms. In this case, her sex life may be leaving her unfulfilled, and she may not know why. The 3 orgasmic zones in every woman's body are deeply symbolic and point directly to her divinity. All of this exists anatomically and symbolically at the base of the bone named sacrum, whose root is derived from the same word as sacred. That looks, when turned upside down, like a mountain, the place men often go to find and commune with God. Yet I believe its being upside down is significant. It teaches us that to get there, like the seed, we can't go up to reach the heights we want to attain. We must go down. Like the seed, we must go down in order to become who we are destined to become. For the seed, going down means submitting to being buried in the mud and the muck. For us, we live as if we believe it means the same for us, but it doesn't. In fact, most of us quite easily and willingly submit to the mud and the muck, to the chaos and suffering of life. We can eventually learn that going down for us is something wholly different. To go down for us so that our rebirth can happen means that we go deeper into ourselves. This is something you already know intuitively, yet may have never considered. As human beings, we tend to be most comfortable living on the surface. Yet the seed teaches us that it's under the surface that the magic happens. Meditation is one way for us to go down. Meditation is going down into ourselves, into the quiet stillness within. Everyone knows that it's a challenge to leave the surface, to go into that quiet stillness. Meditation is how we develop an awareness of, how we create space in, and expand our inner world. Almost no one understands that hypnosis is simply meditation with the purpose of going down in introspection and inquiry. It is meditation with questions and answers. Hypnosis is a conversation between the conscious and unconscious minds. For that conversation to happen, the conscious must go down to meet the unconscious where she resides. Hypnosis is the process of going down to learn. Just like we have to pay attention to the words on a page to learn what they have to teach us, the conscious mind must pay attention to the inner world to learn. Hypnosis is a way we go down and become aware of what is written in the unconscious mind and to consciously learn something different. And you may have not even begun to consider that sex is also a way to go down into self for the purpose of connection. Sex on the surface, or sex in which we can't get out of headspace, leaves us feeling disconnected. When we surrender and go down into the depths of our connection with ourselves, we can connect with our partner and with God on a soul level. This kind of connection dissolves everything that once kept us disconnected. This is the ultimate spiritual experience. It is under the surface that the magic happens. It's on the surface that the wind blows and the waves crash. Under the waves, all is still. And it's ironic that only the bravest souls will leave the crashing waves and go under, venturing into the quiet stillness. And it's in that quiet stillness that we are liberated. You are a developing tree, not just a seed. Do not let yourself be deceived into believing that you are breaking. You are only being liberated. You have been taught that the source of your physical energy comes from food and sleep, but this simply isn't the whole truth. There is a generator of energy inside of you that you most likely have shut down and locked up. Your pussy or your yoni is a power plant or a divine energy transfer station, and it doesn't just produce physical energy. It produces life force energy that is not only powerful, but magnetic. This power plant is your source of divinity and feminine energy. Most of us exist in life attempting to make life happen without this gold mine of energy, and we aren't just exhausted, we are confused. We instinctively know that life could require less effort, if only we could figure out how. Over the course of our lifetimes, we've all had experiences that have led us to shut down and board up this power generator. We've been taught shame and mistrust. This power plant is where our attractiveness is generated, both physical and magnetic. It is also the source which magnetically pulls to us all the resources we need to experience a full and fulfilling life. For women, life begins anew when we learn how to open the locks, pull down the barriers, and breathe life into this internal power plant. As we have seen, nature herself is a teacher, and she uses metaphors to preach her sermons. When I realized I had a gift for translating nature's sermons into words that powerfully change our perceptions of who we are and how the world works, I have worked to develop my gift. And more often than not, at the moment they come clear, they take my breath away. One of my favorite metaphors proclaims the truth of the same dual reality revealed to us by the seed. We say healing work, shadow work is hard. Yet, if we were really afraid of our shadow side, of our darkness, of our pain and struggle and misery as a whole, we would avoid them, wouldn't we? But we don't. And our disorder and dis-ease we wear like badges of honor sometimes. And I think it is brave to finally admit that. We argue for our limitations. We say that revealing our shadow side to ourselves and to each other is vulnerable and hard, but we aren't being completely honest. We talk about and focus on these things constantly. We tell ourselves and each other that we don't like our shadows, but the truth is that we do. Our shadows or our problems are actually quite comforting. They give us meaning. They give us identity. They give us excuses. They give us a feeling of control because we have something to be distracted by, and they give us a feeling of power because we have something to fix. Being stuck in our old patterns gives us power to predict the future. And these things are what humans want most: meaning, identity, control, and power. So why aren't we happy? So why aren't we happy and thriving if we are getting what we want? Because the meaning, the identity, the control, and the power that we have settled for is like the moon, shiny enough to see in the darkness of light. Yet the moon is not too much. We know that moon's light doesn't come from inside itself. Hers is a reflection of a brighter light. The moon's light is an illusion, and gazing upon her is easy on the eyes, isn't it? Moon is shadow illuminated with the reflection of the real source of light, the sun, because the truth is that the moon's light is really sunlight. That is the illusion. If we were to stop seeing only the moonlight, our shadow or our lesser light, and go to the source of that light, we would find sun, and we would find who we really are too. The truth is that the thing we truly fear is the thing we almost completely avoid: our brilliance. Because we all know that it hurts to look at the sun, we avoid our brilliance for the same reason. Even though it's present in our lives every day, we don't look at the sun. It's too much. Your brilliance is every day with you, as is your shadow. What you see depends on what you choose to see. What we are experiencing now in the world and in ourselves is an eclipse. Our moons are perfectly covering the brilliance of our suns that we don't want to look at. And when we do, true meaning, identity, and power will illuminate our lives. They will come the moment we come to see and accept who we really are. Just like you are the seed and the tree, you are also both the moon and the sun. And the process of unbecoming one and becoming the other is really a process of coming into awareness. When we realize that we are not only meant to reflect light, but we were born to shine as brightly as the sun, we will begin to truly radiate, to be in our brilliance, to experience our holiness, to penetrate this world with our radiance, to be our most wise and sovereign selves, to feel divinely beautiful, to welcome an abundance of pleasure, to stand fully surrendered to our experiences in this world, fully open, completely liberated, sovereign. I am here to declare that I think we aren't doing this healing work in the way it could be done. I'm going to be a rebel and proclaim that loud and clear. I see things differently, and I am brave enough to say it. I think it is much simpler and much more profound than we have ever let ourselves believe. It might be true that it isn't possible for our physical eyes to take in all the brilliance of the sun. But what if we thanked the eclipse and the hard shell for protecting us until we were ready, and allowed ourselves to get used to the light and life inside of us? I wonder what would happen if we focused on and talked about our radiance instead. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation. Sexual Reclamation is Spiritual Rebirth was born out of my online course, Reclamation. Reclamation is an online course and more. Reclamation takes a deep plunge into the why of symptoms that plague the lives of women today. taught from the perspective of a woman that navigated emotional numbness and sexual repression to being born into an experience of exquisite feelings, massive potential for creation and nourishing connection, and an expert in the workings of the unconscious mind. Reclamation is a treatise on how women can claim true liberty in their lives. This course is about realigning with our nature, fully believing in our power, shedding the layers of who we thought we were because of who we have been told we are, and stepping into divine radiance. Every woman on the planet should understand the truths taught in this course. Armed with the information in this course, you will be able to reclaim your unique self, your body, your mind, your voice, your boundaries, your emotions, your choices, and your internal guidance system. The Reclamation Initiative is both a community and an invitation. It is an invitation to the women of the world to reclaim all that has been lost to them. Today, we have more rights than we have had in the past, yet we are plagued with inner limits that hold us back from accepting and embodying all of our power to become who we really are. The Reclamation Initiative is an invitation for women to look longer at what society tells us about who we are and to dig deeper within ourselves to find the truth. It is a call to women around the world and to the women next door to awaken from the sleep-like state imposed by social programming and the indoctrination in our past to reconnect deeply with our own internal compasses. The Reclamation Initiative is also a community. It is a community of women committed to reclaiming their sovereignty by unleashing their sexuality. This is a community of women committed to vulnerability, honesty, integrity, accountability, and autonomy. In the end, all the symptoms of disorder and dis-ease in your life aren't your real problem. They are problems your unconscious mind creates to distract you from your biggest problem, that you are afraid of your own divine magnificence, and you are hiding from it in a heinous act of self-betrayal. Isn't it time to not do that anymore? Obviously, this is the first time I've done this presentation. I'm still working on the delivery. Thanks for being patient with me. But it's really the content that's powerful. And I don't really, no matter how that content could be delivered, it's powerful as it is. And I love that I don't stand in the way of that, no matter how awkwardly I deliver it.
It was beautiful. Thank you so much. I can tell it's your first time, but there's so much power behind it that I can't wait to see where you go with this.
Thank you. Thank you. The image of you had of yourself before and what you see yourself as now, what's shifted for you?
It's really interesting because today, well, this is kind of private, but I'm going to share it because this is what that's all about. I've been sunbathing as nakedly as possible lately. And I was just envisioning myself as just this, I guess kind of like what you were saying is this reflection of this brilliance in the beginning, because I was just out in the sun. And so I was seeing myself as this brilliant being already, but it was more of a reflection. And so I'm super excited to move forward in me being the brilliance, I think that will be really fun to see what happens there.
It's a massive shift in perception. Yeah, I love that.
This is Paula. I was impressed, and actually it kind of made me shudder a little bit because of my upbringing and my training, that it's all a hush-hush thing, that we don't talk about it. And it's like, how do you learn about it? I've often thought. I mean, I was more open with my kids than because of my husband than most people are, but I did feel a little bit of recoil
Mhm.
at the start
Just using
because
words,
you what?
just me using words.
Yeah, you go out loud in a group of people.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
there was beauty. But I know I'm totally not part of your generation.
No,
But
I've had to overcome them myself. Only done that very recently.
but it was beautiful nonetheless.
There is that recoil, and really that's programming, right? That's the way we were programmed. Really, if you look at it, this is why it's so rebellious. It's so rebellious for us to look at these things and say, everything that I've learned about this is wrong. There's something hidden here that's so valuable for me. I'm going to move away. Like, I'm going to move all that programming aside, and I'm going to take a direct, right? It's that penetration piece, right? I'm going to take a direct focus, and I'm going to find out what's here that's been hidden from me my entire life. It's a very, very
Yeah, I've actually been kind of on a journey a little bit in my own rebellious spirit. My husband passed away 3 years ago, and sexual desires are still there. I mean, if we're being open and honest. Are we done recording?
no.
But why is that something to be ashamed of, Paula? Because we are sexual beings, and just because your husband died doesn't mean that you died, you know? So I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of. And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah. Well,
Probably so. It's the
process.
recoil, it's still the recoil in the wrong programming. I mean, I've been looking some stuff up, and I mean, literally this week I looked up what are the health benefits of an orgasm.
Had you ever considered, or did you find anything that I alluded to within the content of this workshop as far as the benefits of orgasm?
I did find some stuff. Your content's completely different than what I looked up the other night.
Yeah.
And it's more beautiful. It's actually more sacred in the way it's presented.
Well, what we find on the internet is very clinical. It's very cold, or it's pornography. You know what I mean? So it's very rare to find this connection in a beautiful way. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, of course. And that's true. Like, it's either one or the other, and we don't realize that it's neither, that the truth, neither of those, that those are both pieces that have been used to dissuade, to hide, to create shame and recoil. It's literally used to create that recoil in us so that we hide from it, because this is the most powerful thing on the planet, right? These truths, and there's more to it. Obviously, this is something that I just, what to take as a half an hour, right? A half an hour of content. There's so much more for us to consider and think about and look at. But it really is the most powerful truth that we as women can embrace. And even the idea is powerful for men, right? Because men come to realize that they can become a tool for our healing, right? That they get to be the space, the container for that healing. And out of a relationship, you get to be both for yourself. You get to be the masculine holding the masculine container, and you also get to be the feminine flow. So whether you're in a relationship or you aren't in a relationship, this journey through this rebirth process of really embracing your sexuality and coming into a space of being, I hate to use the words because in the past this has a connotation to it, but sexually liberated. It's really spiritually liberated through the power of sexuality. And the most fascinating part about all of it is how through that process we come to know ourselves. I've come to know myself in the most amazing, more in depth than I ever dreamed was even possible. simply through this process of being open and allowing that recoil, right? To kind of push that recoil aside until I'm comfortable with the words, I'm comfortable with the actions, I'm comfortable with this space of understanding life in a very different way. Like I didn't see it this way before. And it's shifted so much for me. And that's why I love sharing it with other women, because I really think it has the power to shift our perception of ourselves so much, as individuals and as women collectively.
Also, something that happens when we have orgasm, there's a softening and there's an opening that happens. And as women, we've been trained for so long to be like men, which doesn't mean that they can't be soft and open, right? But as women, it is who we are to be soft and open. And so I just love the idea, the connection here, because as a mother, I've been kind of a hard, kind of a cold person, because I didn't know how to deal with all the energy, all the activity of all my children. And but I'm learning it's never too late. And I'm really just leaning into the softening and opening. And I've also really struggled sexually. And my mom was very much a hippie, and she was very open with her body, but I was the one that was like, oh, that's a little too much. I don't think that's, so I kind of went away from sexuality in my own childlike mind. Maybe I saw something somewhere that influenced that. I don't know, but I'm coming around, and it's only deepened my relationships with my children, with my husband, with myself, with women around me.
Yeah. Sexual energy, like I've stated before, sexual energy is creative energy. Okay. But it also is creative energy distinctly for us, right? It contains our blueprint for who we are. So the more we have sexual energy flowing, the more we just be our fully embodied, natural, most beautiful selves. And everything that we create comes out of that. That includes our nurturing. The way we nurture our children becomes more authentic. The way we connect with people becomes more authentic. The way, whatever it is, whatever our gifts are in the world. There's so much of what happens as we're functioning in the world. We do a lot of copycatting, right? We do a lot of copying. And when that sexual energy is flowing, like the need to copy doesn't exist anymore. There's this very honest perception of who we are, and the creative energy just flows differently. And what comes out of us carries parts and pieces of us, right? This presentation that I created contains parts and pieces of me that I couldn't go in and point out necessarily, but they're there. And my ability to create them, like I'm embedded in that. It's not just some ideas that I got from someone and, copy and pasted them and I'm presenting them here. Most of the content here is stuff that's just come through me as I've pondered and considered and been in that space of introspection and then made those connections. So it's really, there's so much more than just, the clinical powers of orgasm. Most women don't know that the orgasms come from different areas of our bodies, right? There are different orgasms. How many of you guys knew that, like really clearly, distinctly? There are very different kinds of orgasms. Okay, would you guys like to talk about that a little bit? Clitoral orgasms, everyone I think knows what the clitoris is, and it's and what's so beautiful about it is how all that ties into the metaphor of the temple, right? Like a woman literally has to be warm and open and receptive and lubricated and all those pieces for penetration to actually do its work. And there's not enough women in this world who stand and say, no, that is an absolute necessity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's an absolute necessity.
It's an absolute necessity. And if not, it feels
It's
like
not pleasurable. Yeah,
it
it's not
feels like
pleasurable.
trauma, right? And so we develop barriers. We develop more and more barriers. And a lot of women actually have vaginas that are numb. I was one of them, completely and totally numb. Okay, so clitoral orgasms are all about warming up, and it's interesting how it's like an altar. Like certain acts have to be performed there in order to be able to gain entrance into that sacred space, right? And when, there's not enough women in the world, and I wish every woman in the world would treat that as the sacred space that it actually is, and insist upon that opening first, right?
So, but we're never taught this.
No, we're not.
Taught how to open that. Like, I don't even know. I mean, I'm not trying to get graphic, but could you be a little bit more specific? What does it mean, specific acts that have to happen?
Sure. Any kind of clitoral stimulation. Okay. Any kind of clitoral stimulation. And I'm not saying that's the only way to warm up a woman. Okay. But I am saying that it's interesting how that is almost like embedded in God's plan. Look how it completely fits that pattern of the temple. Okay. So it's like there has to be this gift given, right? And the gift has to be openly received in order to gain entrance into that sacred space. So any kind of action that's sexual, that warms up, that opens up, that connects, right? All of that stuff. Every woman knows this. Every woman knows that that's the only way it feels right. Okay. Clitoral stimulation has nothing to do with feeling safe. It has nothing to do with feeling open, right? Do you see what I'm saying? And so it's really kind of a mechanical thing. You can start with the clitoris and get aroused. You can't start with penetration and get aroused. It just doesn't happen that way. Okay. So that's the one thing that women can and should understand about themselves. That's my message. Like so much of this, I want women to understand themselves and how their anatomy ties into their spirituality, right? So you can stimulate a clitoris to orgasm in front of a room full of people. Okay, that's just how it is. Unless there was some serious inhibition. Okay, if someone was open to it, then it would be fine. But in fact, clinically, a lot of clinicians say, and a lot of the books say that the clitoral orgasm is the only one that really exists, because you can't go into a clinic and demonstrate the other ones because they require so much vulnerability. They require so much openness and depth. Does that make sense? The clitoris is simply an organ that exists for our pleasure. It has no other purpose. It does no other thing. It's just there in and of itself, doing its beautiful thing and giving us this beautiful gift. And it's interesting to me that that when you talk about the G-spot orgasm, which is further inside. So if you were to use your fingers, like 2 fingers, and slip them into your vagina, you hit your pubic bone, right? Just behind that pubic bone, there's a zone that's highly erogenous. Okay. It can take a little bit of pressure. Like sometimes it's just a tiny bit, like another light touch. Sometimes it can take super intense pressure. But if you've ever heard of female ejaculation, that generally comes from a G-spot orgasm. Okay, women will actually ejaculate large amounts of water in that process. A lot of women have never experienced that, but a lot of women have never experienced an orgasm aside from clitoral orgasms. Cervical orgasms are further back, right? If you can reach with your fingers, you can reach the cervix. Obviously, for any of you who have ever had a baby in a hospital or from a midwife or anyone, they've reached their fingers in and they've checked your cervix, right? We all know this. So everyone knows, I think everyone's had the experience that if there isn't that really beautiful opening space, that surrendered space, penetration, if when the penis hits the cervix, it's painful. It just flat out hurts. It's super uncomfortable. Nobody likes it. Okay, so there has to be, in order for a woman to experience a cervical orgasm, there has to be a lot of there has to be connection. There has to be, like, right, we have to be in that space. But that's where you get really, really deep desire. Like when a woman is in that space where her cervix has expanded, and I don't know if it physically expands, but there's the space that expands. It no longer hurts when penetration, with penetration. So cervical orgasms are the ones that rewire your brain, literally. Remember, the cervix is that portal from heaven to earth, right? The cervix is really the central piece of a woman. We say it's our heart, but it's really our cervix. Our cervix is connected to our heart, and our cervix is also connected to our crown chakra. So when a woman is open, there's like this energetic channel, right? And when she experiences that orgasm, that channel opens and she has this amazingly beautiful, transcendent experience. And I don't like to focus too much on spiritual experiences. I love to focus on spiritual growth. So from my perception, I like the idea of creating space for an experience to happen, but not putting all of my all of the value on a spiritual experience. What I have noticed,
It's pressure, right? And then you can't relax enough to receive that. Yeah.
What I have noticed is literally like the flood of changes that have happened in my life since I started making these shifts, since I started learning about all of this. I just start seeing new and different things all the time, things that I'm not really even working on. I just look back and go, oh, that's just so different. I do that so differently. And, you know, like I said, this isn't my lifelong experience. I'm coming at it from a place where I was completely and totally numb. And also, just like Paula, like I recoiled at all of this stuff for most of my life. So as far as orgasms, it's really fun to get into that space of going, whoa, I'm whatever age I am, and I still haven't learned everything. So this is going to be a journey for me. This is an adventure. This is something brand new and different. I get to just explore this and play with this and see how I can learn and grow. And yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you for creating this safe space for us to have this conversation, because there aren't very many spaces. Like even mother-daughter relationships, mothers don't know what to tell their daughters. Like this is so important. And I just wanted to kind of share something that kind of connected for me while I was listening to your presentation. In January, I decided to write a book or be part of a co-authored book. But before that, I had this intense desire to get really close to my husband, to forgive everything and just see him the way that the man that he is in my life, and the container that he brings for me to mirror myself, you know, in the safety that he creates for me. And I just really needed to feel that connection with him. And it was the strongest, most powerful thing that I've ever experienced, that need to know him and to be connected to him. And then because I see now, because I did that, I was able to go in this creative space, and I was able to write and be published and give myself a voice. And it was just the most beautiful thing. And I'm ebbing out of that creative right now, but I want to be there more. And I want all of us to be there more. And it feels really important right now to be able to do that.
Exactly.
I'd like to make one comment. I don't know how many of you might have grown up with teachings and ideations about it's all taboo. All sexual stuff is taboo. And I bought a book for my son and his wife, actually an audio book. I bought two of them, one for him, and I wanted to listen to it too, so I bought one for me. And one of the really interesting ideas that it presented was the idea that how can you help your partner know how to help you have pleasure if you don't have any idea of what you need to have pleasure. And so I struggle still back and forth some with the idea is it okay to figure that out? Am I okay doing this? Or do I feel guilt sometimes when I do? But how else do we know if we don't explore what we have?
Exactly.
And I grew up with lots of guilt as a child. I was super, super, super curious about sexuality.
Mhm.
But it was taboo. You couldn't talk to anybody about it, you know?
Right, exactly.
So I don't know. I just thought I'd throw that idea out there because I'm still not 100% not recoiled by it. And I still have some guilt around some of it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't know any other way to manage or learn. And we have to teach our partners what it is for us. I mean, it's women's job to teach men in lots of areas. And this is one where we have to actually really learn.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll tell you how I kind of navigated that idea, because I grew up with the mentality that it was not okay. And yet when I realized that really the whole reason for my journey here was for me to be sovereign over all the parts of me, right? To take accountability for. So I'm accountable for my words. I'm accountable for my actions. I'm accountable for the roles that I play. I'm accountable, like all these pieces, right? I'm accountable for my mental health. I'm accountable for my spiritual health. I'm accountable for my emotional health, like all the pieces, right? How can that be the one thing that I can't own and that it belongs to someone else? And I have to give my sovereignty over to someone else and say, okay, I'm putting this in your hands. And I hope that you do the right thing, because I hope you can figure it out, because it's not something that's okay for me to figure out. That feels really wrong for me. And so I went totally on intuition, if that makes any sense. Like I went totally based on the fact that makes zero sense whatsoever. Can you imagine us doing that with anything else in our lives? Like, okay, my emotional health, now it's in your hands and I can't do anything about it. It's all yours, because it's not mine. I can't own it. So owning my sexuality really came just because of intuition. It came because tiny one, because I feel strongly that sovereignty is the ultimate spiritual attainment, right? To attain sovereignty in all areas of my life was really what I want and what I'm working toward. So owning my sexuality had to be in that space. And that's it. Like all I did was say, okay, I'm at least going to give myself space. I'm not going to call it right and I'm not going to call it wrong. I'm going to give myself a learning space of zero judgment. And I chose not to judge, and I chose to leave whatever needed to be left aside, right? All the judgments aside, myself and from the world and anywhere else that it was coming from. And I basically created a bubble for myself. And of course, I came into this from a long marriage where I was not seen, where I was not understood, where I was treated very badly. And there was a lot of sexual trauma. There was a lot of trauma in all ways, but there was a lot of sexual trauma. So I came into this bubble completely numb. And so it wasn't like, oh, this is super pleasurable. It was painful. It was hard. It was challenging. It was work for me. And it was disappointing. Over and over and over again, I'd go into that bubble and create that space for myself, and I wouldn't feel anything. But little bit by little bit, I learned to see myself differently. I learned to stop putting myself in a space of treating myself like a machine. Like, you should be able to feel this. You should have an orgasm. Right? Like, and I realized that that's what we do as women, because that's kind of the male perspective, right? The male perspective is you go in, you do the thing. The female perspective is it's about flow. It's about just letting go. Whatever happens, happens. So that experience didn't teach me necessarily about what was pleasurable in my body. That experience taught me more about letting go and being okay with what is, even when it wasn't what I wanted it to be in the moment. And it's been a long process for me. I think some people come through it faster. It's taken a long time for me to be in that space of openness with myself. And I sexually have had a lot to work through. I mean, there's been a lot of tears. There are times when I have an orgasm that I get super angry. So I know that it's doing its work. And that could be frightening or scary, right? We can move into that space, have an orgasm, and like want to hit a pillow or scream. But we have to understand that there's connections that are happening. Like, if we feel like crying, there's connections to our heart that are being made. Neurologically, there's shifts happening. If we get really, really angry or really want to cry, screaming helps us open up our throat chakra, helps us find our voice, so that in the sexual experience, we can use our voice freely, because so many of us don't. So many of us just kind of keep quiet and don't let the real wildness in ourselves out. And if there's anything that I've learned, I've very much been not okay with my wild my entire life. And I'm learning to embrace that part of me. Some people are really good at embracing that part of themselves. Like Haben, excuse me, like your mom, you were saying that she was kind of just like that, and I've had my connection with hippies. I actually have spent some time at the farm and met Ina May Gaskin, and the mother of, or the grandmother, I guess now, of home birth and all of that. But I still have always been just super like rigid.
Something that's very interesting that I've realized lately, just in my own spiritual walk, is that I don't think we come here to have experiences. We come here to have mistakes. We come here to learn and grow through our experiences. And so when it comes to right or wrong, good or bad with sex, I don't think that those words really apply. I think that it's more about, what experience do I want to continue to have? What experience do I want to not have anymore? I think that that's a much better question to ask than right or wrong, because, oh my gosh, when it comes to morality and sexuality, like that's such a crazy, such a crazy relationship. So,
and that's kind of what I was explaining in my experience. Is I got into that experience and I decided that, what I really wanted to have was a connection with my body so that I could actually feel. And I wasn't okay with the relationship that I had with my spouse. Like, that just didn't work. And so I filed for divorce. Like, and just me filing for divorce, or like Paula was saying, like, we get divorced, we lose a spouse, that part of us does not go with them. It did not belong to them. And that's how I knew that was right for me, because that part of me wasn't his. It was mine. Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a comment in the chat by Anita, who says there are breast stimulation orgasms as well. Super fun. Thank you, Anita, for sharing that.
Yeah. I think we sometimes overlook that our whole body can be an erogenous zone if you're in the right headspace. But
or out of head.
If you don't have a little nurser desensitizing you 24/7, then it can be really fun. But I did just want to hop on to add, how when you have a change in perspective and you realize the divinity of your body and the sacredness of the connection of your spirit to your body, your soul being united here in this funky, dirty, awful, mortal experience that can be also so wonderful, it becomes almost sacrilege when you realize that the harmful nature of the teaching that there's something wrong about your touching your own body, that there's something wrong about your feeling your own body and discovering what feels good and what doesn't. And honestly, you might find some resistance even to just intentionally sensually stroking your own hand. Like, it's okay to start with really simple things that you are comfortable with and just get really good at noticing how it feels and also how that helps you to be connected spiritually. And then you can kind of go from there.
It is about
Most women do better when it's not really goal centric. I know when I've worked with a sex therapist who was very much like, go find out what works for you. And the focus was very much on what makes an orgasm. That did not work for me at all. And it was a horrible, horrible experience. For which they apologized. But we need to understand that we're unique and that our bodies really do belong to us. And there's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for, Mr. Buddy Boy? A lot of really good things that happen when you're fully present in your own body and safe in your own skin. No matter what, it's a very good thing.
exactly. And we know when we're the ones, if we're having a sexual experience and we're the only ones there, we know we're going to be sacred. We're going to treat it as sacred. And sometimes that's the only space we have. If we're in a relationship or in a relationship that isn't safe, or in a relationship that we're working on becoming safe, or not in a relationship at all, that we're still the ones that have sovereignty over that space. So yeah, and thank you.
Y'all are blowing my freaking mind. Like, I have so much crap wrapped around sex. Like, I felt like a horrible human being that I had sex before I joined the church. Anyways, and then before I was married, and then I realized that sexuality was a really important connection with my husband. And now I'm realizing that it's okay to touch myself. Like, this is freaking huge and so important and so beautiful. Thank you.
I just wanted to comment based on Anita's comment. Something that came to me that I just learned this year is that I'm responsible for meeting my own needs. I mean, I grew up in a codependent home. I was codependent. Everything, since I've learned about codependency, almost everything I hear in the music world is promoting codependence. And so I thought it was my husband's job to meet my needs in all sorts of ways, not just sexually. And as I started to date, and that didn't go well with one person. I mean, he was a wonderful person, but it wasn't, our match wasn't right. And as I was coming down off of that and feeling really, really horrible, somewhere, I don't know where it was, I learned what was a YouTube video now, I remember, as I was looking up needy. Why am I so needy? What do I do about my neediness? How do I fix it? You're responsible for meeting your own needs. And it's super uncomfortable still. But when I'm feeling really needy, I wrap my arms around my neck and I give myself a hug and I rock. And I can see how Anita's talking about touching your hips, touch your body somewhere. Touch is important to us. I also learned that touch is so important for our humanness. And so, and this whole video section is making me just want to cry. Held it back until now. But just the idea of just giving myself touch to meet my needs when there's no one else at the moment to meet even basic touching needs, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's so profound. And another thing to take it even one step further is to recognize and realize why we have so much curiosity around sex, why we have such strong needs. We call it needs, but it's really our innate need to be ourselves, to discover ourselves, to know ourselves. And that's so different from what they say on the surface. You know, I mean, on the surface, yes, it looks like I have sexual needs and I have touch needs. But when you really look at it, what it really is a desire to be deeply, deeply in touch with ourselves. So you see where I'm going with that? Like, I'm taking it one step more, one step deeper and saying, yeah, we have needs, but why?
And I also, something I've realized this year is we're a spirit in a body, and sometimes that integration can be really difficult, integrating our spirit into our body. And so touch is a really powerful way of doing that, you know, and this is our gift. This is our body. This is our vehicle. It's really important that we integrate with it as much as possible.
Yes. And you think about the energetic charge that sexual energy has and orgasm has, that's the glue. That's the glue that really does all of that integration. And what it does is it burns out all of our crap as it's gluing it together. Does that make sense? So there's this really powerful mechanism that at once is like a furnace for burning all the crap in our lives, like all the residual effects of trauma, because everyone knows that the residual effects of trauma are not trusting, being rigid, right? Like not being open, not being surrendered, worrying, like closing ourselves off. That's all the residual effects of trauma. Sex is the exact opposite of that, right? It's the exact opposite. And so it allows us to not only glue those two parts of us together.
Can we say a healthy sexual relationship would be that way? Because not all sex, we know that not all sex is healthy. And some of us may have never have felt that at all, ever in our lives.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for clarifying that, because that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. When done right, sex can be the furnace that burns out trauma and the glue that glues us not only to ourselves, like integrate the different parts of ourselves, but also connects us to our partner, connects us to the divine.
I have a question really fast. It's gonna kind of change the direction of the conversation, but first I want to say, like, this is seriously, I've been reading a book on sexual wholeness. That's what I wanted to concentrate during this eclipse portal. And I have learned so much. And I feel like it's just like I've had this puzzle thrown out and all of the pieces are connecting now. So thank you. Your metaphors were amazing. But when we started and you asked us to like have an image of ourselves, the thing that came to my mind was I'm a child of God and I'm a being of light and intelligence. And then when you got to the moon part, I was like, wait a second, like the feminine is a reflection of the light, just like you said. But then you said the light, like you kind of changed it after you put that metaphor in so that the light comes from us, which that's originally what I thought. But then Haben, to talk about her experience in writing her book, just to think, like, I feel like that is a reflection, that creative process was a reflection of the light that came from her experience with her husband. And so I'm not clear on that part yet. If we could talk about that for a second.
It's something that I don't know, like it's just a metaphor and we're just playing with it, right? We're just trying to find meaning where we can. I know that, you know, for centuries on centuries, they've always said, you know, the feminine is the yin, the masculine is the yang, right? You've got the sun and the moon. But I kind of separated all of that and just went with this idea that we focus on our lesser light. We focus on the parts of our lives that we're able to handle, we're able to look at, right? So we're focusing on the things that are hard for us. We're focusing on the little things in our life that are amazing. What I really think is that we hide from, it goes back to that one poem written by Marianne Williamson that says something like, we're not afraid of our darkness, we're afraid of our light, right? It's that idea And so really the idea is that we take the brilliance of who we are and we put the moon in front of it because it's easy to look at. Right. And we're kind of hiding who we really are. Does that make sense? So how many of us are hiding who we really are, even from ourselves? Because we haven't discovered all the parts and pieces of who we are really deeply.
And I think for me, what I was trying to say with mine is I thought I had to do it all. And, my husband never lived up to my expectations. But when I let go of that and when I let him really support me and love me in the way only he can, not in a way I can make him, but only in the way that he can, when I release that for him, it's this beautiful synergy happens, and I think women are powerful and I think that we're amazing, but I think it's even more powerful when we integrate the masculine and the feminine. And, I'm just learning about this too. Like, we're all just learning about this. And the idea that the light comes from within instead of us being a reflection, I think that that's just our ability to align with the divine God, our savior, whatever that word is for you. It's just like, by being in the light of the universe, we also get to add our light to it. And we're really, really powerful at it.
Yeah. Chelsea, what are your thoughts? I mean, you're the one who asked the question, but
I don't know. I think it's something that I'm going to have to digest, because like I said, I started with that idea that, I feel like the light was mine. Like I'm a being of light and intelligence is where I started. But then as I was listening, I was like, wait, honestly, this is a really long story short, is I had an experience with a friend doing a sound bath last year, and I had like an image in my mind of Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother, and like he was in front, all of this glory, and this divine mother was like in the background attending to each person in the room. And I had never been a person who had been upset about my femininity or really like dwelled on that at all. But I did in that moment wonder, like, why are the women always in the back doing all of the work? But then the man is like the hero of the story. And so it's something that I've been learning about a lot this year. And so then the image of the moon reflecting the light, to me, I was like, well, there's another sign that is femininity is, we're just there to do all of, we do the cycles and we make things move on the earth, but it's the sun that makes things grow, and so I'm learning a lot. But I think I started in a good place with me thinking that I am a divine, a being of light and knowledge. So I don't know.
As you were saying that, what I'm really seeing right now is we don't have all not everything's revealed yet. In a lot of history, the feminine was erased out of scripture, out of everything, but we're seeing this shift happening right now. And sometimes our visions are just a reflection of how we see the world. You know what I mean? So we see women as always in the background, but I think things are shifting. I think women are starting to move forward. And I don't think that that's out of balance. I think it's just now is the time, so let's just wait and see I'm just really excited about what happens.
Exactly.
I
Chelsea,
think you're
clarify one thing just before, and then of course we'll get to another question. So what I'm saying is that you're both the sun and the moon in this metaphor, right? There's no other thing. And are you seeing the sun version of you, or are you seeing the moon version of you? Are you seeing the moon version of us is really just the watered down, comfortable version. The one that just gets by day to day, that's reflecting off of, that's the copycat of the world, right? Because all we're doing is getting light from some other source and then reflecting it out. But
Thank you for clarifying that. That's helpful.
so when we move that aside and allow us to just shine in our brilliance, right? So really the moon is the same metaphor as the seed. Okay. And then the sun is the same as the metaphor for the entire tree. Okay. Does that make sense?
I was just going to comment as I sit here listening to everybody talk. I think we probably have 4 generations represented. And it's really interesting to see, for me to see the different ideas and how we've changed up through the generations and our ideas and the things that are taught. And I mean, you younger people
I'm a lot younger than I am. I'm a lot older than I look. So if you're thinking I'm pretty young, I'm not.
Well, you have 7 kids, so I know you're not the 4th generation. But I'm definitely the first.
Probably a lot younger than I am.
No, but it's just an interesting perception to
I see it. Yeah.
where we are here, you know, in our ideas and thoughts. And
yeah, exactly. And you know, Haben did refer at one point, she said, you know, how do we do this thing with our daughters? Like, how do we teach our daughters? And I'm really considering creating some kind of something for just a video kind of like this that contains some really important points for girls to understand about themselves, because I'm a firm believer that teenagerhood, like all the issues we deal with in teenagerhood, are the fact that we've taken sexuality from kids. Like, this is the moment when their sexuality starts to come online, right? And we take it from them. And let's be honest, we had it taken from us, right? All of this yummy beauty, all of this gorgeousness was just stripped down to something that made us powerless and shamed. And so I really think that changing the trajectory of that and how we raise our kids, whether, you know, to let go of the shame piece and to let go of the control that we have. It brings up all kinds of stuff, right? For all of us, we're like, oh, I don't even know what that would look like or feel like. That feels like too much. But all I know is that I feel strongly that the teenager-ish behavior that we experience when our kids are that age, a lot of the fact that we take their power away because they don't understand their sexuality and we're not nurturing it.
And I might just add, it's not just our daughters. It has to be a super condensed version, because I know that I tried when my son got married to have a little bit of a conversation and he wouldn't have anything. So I got one sentence. And so my sentence was go slow and be gentle and ask questions. Because that's all he'd let me have. Actually, he wouldn't let me have it. I just threw it in. When he said no.
So one of the really beautiful things that I know, while I haven't experienced it personally, I've watched a number of women go through this process. A number of women are going through this process and they're like, my ex. When I'm talking about husbands, it's my ex. So my husband isn't on board with this, or my husband is, there's pressure, or there's not a safe place, or whatever. We all know, I mean, we've all, you know, kind of figured out from the way from the generation we've lived in, right? That the masculine leads. So we have all these women who are struggling and suffering, waiting for their partner to take the lead in this. And it doesn't happen. And there's so much frustration and there's so much sadness and there's so much, because women don't want to jump into that masculine space of being the leader. But at the same time, they don't want to continue living the way they're living in the relationship that they have. They want something different. They want something better. So the magic formula for all of this is when a woman wakes up to her own sexuality, whether even if it's by herself, even if she creates a bubble and opens up to her own sexuality, her magnetism shifts. She becomes more attractive. She becomes more open to being seen. She becomes more inviting. And all of that, what gains the man's attention, right? And so her just choosing to only for herself open that space up inside of her, she automatically becomes the leader without becoming the leader. Does that make sense? By leading herself, she turns on herself, then all of that magnetic power attracts the masculine. He looks and he says, oh my gosh, I remember who I am because I can see who you are. I see big nods over there. That's so beautiful.
That is what happened.
Yes.
I mean, it wasn't sexually yet, but that's one next. But when I went in and decided I am responsible for me, I am responsible for my happiness. It is not his. What a horrible lie we were taught in fairy tales that they would rescue us, right? When I realized that it was me and it's not him and it's not his fault, and I just started feeding myself and nourishing myself, it released my husband to be this amazing man that I hadn't, like, I saw it, right? And I wanted that for him, for me, right? But it didn't activate until I activated myself. And I'm not saying that's true for all men, right? But we've got this dynamic in this world where we're all disconnected. Many of us are disconnected, even from our spouse, even from ourselves, right? But if we can go back to self and love and nurture ourselves in whatever arena that is, which sexually is what we're talking about, right? Of course, that magnetism just naturally happens. And of course, that wakes up everyone around us and be like, I want that too, you know? Are we ready to start a revolution? Because it's happening, this conversation.
It is.
I am, because I'm tired of the guilt.
What's that?
I'm ready for the revolution because I'm tired of feeling guilty about what I feel needs to be different to a certain extent. And the idea that it heals trauma, wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And it can, even if you're not in a relationship, because outside of a relationship, right, there's a lack of trust. When you learn to trust yourself, that mirrors out. Like self-trust happening here will mirror out into the world. You learn how to trust the world. Any rigidity that's happening here, it'll change the rigidity of the world out there. Everything we can change in here. This is the space, right? This is the space where change happens, and it automatically shifts out into our perception of the world. And so even in a relationship where you're all by yourself, which for the vast majority of the time that I've spent doing this, I've been alone. That relationship with myself has shifted and changed so much as far as I've developed trust. I mean, like all the parts and pieces just came together as far as healing myself from trauma. Yes, I was doing other work, but I don't think the other work is even necessary. I mean, it may be, and it may be on our journey, and that's great too. But I could take this amount of information and I could take it to a village in Latin America or a village in Africa where a woman has been like terrorized in a war-torn country, and I could literally teach her these very, very few concepts, and with absolutely no help or nothing outside of herself, she could heal herself. That's my belief.
That's cool. That's beautiful.
And I think that's the way God intended it to be. Like I said, I don't think we're doing this healing thing.
I'm seeing so much coming back to self. Like that seems to be like the theme of the universe right now, or the earth, just coming back to self, coming back to self. The answers within, the answers, you know, it's just, I see that. I see what you're saying. I see that you could do that work. Just give them the tools.
Yeah. And the tools are literally, they don't need any tools. Like
Your
they don't-
body.
Yeah, you've got a hand, you've got a vagina. That's it. Right?
Somehow though, we have to be told though, because I've been told since I was a teenager that I needed to learn to love myself, but I didn't know how to do that.
But
I
as
guess because
teenagers-
I didn't know I was in charge.
Also, yeah, as women,
Mhm.
we didn't know we were in charge, but also we were told that our bodies and sexuality was bad. So they took the tools, you know. Well, I don't mean,
I see. Okay,
yeah,
I get it now.
yeah. Amy, thank you so much. Like this,
You're very welcome.
beautiful and powerful. And I'm so grateful that we didn't have to do a private question answer session, that we were just able to do this, because it's going to help so many women, I think, just hearing our conversation. So thank you.
You're so very welcome. You're so very welcome. It's been a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.